Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology. This is going to be fun. If you're new to vinyl, if you don't know where to start when it comes to getting a record player, you have found the right channel and the right place. So hit subscribe and check out our playlist completely designed for people new to the hobby of records and record players, turntables, all that good stuff. So today we are going to talk about and show you how to choose the right record player for you. You're not going to want to miss this.
Welcome to Record-ology.
So you've decided that it's finally time to jump into the vinyl record hobby. Well, first let me say welcome. And we've got a lot of content for beginners, so definitely check out our playlist dedicated to that topic. But where do you start when it comes to getting a record player? I mean, that's a huge thing. Although it's interesting, a lot of folks start off with records before they even get a record player. So maybe that's you, or maybe you're starting with the record player, which would seem to be the natural starting point, but where do you begin? That's what this video is about, and how do you pick the perfect record player? By the way, I guess I'm reflecting in there. Hello, who's wearing the Bucky shirt? The first decision, are you gonna go down the novelty route, or are you going down the component route? If you go down, and either way is fine. I say either way is fine, but if you want to go with a suitcase player, an all-in-one player, something of that nature, we're going to follow that to its logical conclusion. We're going to show you what to look for. Or if you're in this for sound quality, if you want something to get the most out of your vinyl investment in terms of audio, sound quality itself, and less about the styling, aesthetic, etc., then we're going to go down that route as well. So it's sort of a choose your own adventure. We're going to go down both routes, but I want to start with the suitcase player. Now, the suitcase player is a very, very common and popular starting point for people getting into vinyl. They are designed for people that don't really know a lot about records or record players, or haven't been into the hobby of records in some time and just want to kind of dip their toe into the proverbial ocean of vinyl collecting. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, it does have its limitations. One of those limitations is going to be this cartridge right here. The cartridge being the piece right here with the needle that turns the record into audible sound, or at least it plays a part in that process. Oftentimes you will hear that these types of record players destroy your records, which is not true. They will wear them out faster than higher end systems that we're going to look at in a little bit. But it all comes down to that cartridge, which is common. You'll notice that even though these are two different record player brands, they have a lot of similarities. And it's not one company, certainly not Crosley, making these. There is a plethora of companies making suitcase player, at least I would say 10 to 15 distinct variants on the market. But there are a lot of commonalities, like the platter mechanisms are similar, the tone arms, the controls can be different, as you can see between this one and that one, but they often use this type of a cartridge. This is called a ceramic cartridge, and they require more weight to work, and that's why these are a little heavier when they push down on your records, and that leads to the wear. It wears them out faster. For most people, this is not going to be an issue. It's not something you're going to notice unless you're playing that record all day, every day, and then after a year, you're going to be like, hey, this is starting to wear out. If you're a casual user, you stuff records from like a thrift store, an antique store, it's just not going to be an issue. And that's where a lot of the misinformation is with these things. They also are very cheap in more ways than one. They are cheap to buy. That's just a low price point. Because again, they're designed for the impulse buy. They're designed for somebody who did not wake up that day planning on buying a record player, but happened down the aisle at their local Walmart or Kohl's or wherever it may be and say, you know, this is cool. This is a cute little toy. Maybe I want to do records. And then away they go. But they started down this path. And if you right now are pondering which path to start, this may not be the path for you. There's not much of an upgrade component to these. There is an audio output, so you can connect them to a bigger stereo system, but you're not going to really increase the quality of sound. These types of mechanisms are what I would classify as record players versus turntables. They play records. They often have built-in speakers. If you don't want to get into, a serious relationship with vinyl, and you want to just kind of keep it superficial. You kind of want to dabble in it, but you don't have any intentions on making serious moves into vinyl in the long term. This may be where it begins and where it ends with you, and that's fine. Plus, for 35, 40, 50 bucks, you've got everything you need in one box, but it's sort of a dead end. Now, everything I said about this holds true for the wooden all-in-ones like this. Very, very similar. Similar mechanisms, similar capabilities or limitations, etc., etc. So that is where it ends. And that's fine. So if this is what you want, here's what to look for when you go buying one of these. Now, if you're buying new, what we just talked about is pretty much the only consideration you need to make. But if you're buying used, if you're at a thrift store or an antique, or you're looking on Craigslist or Facebook, and you don't really know what to look for, and you've decided to go down this path, I want to kind of give you a brief summation of what it is you need to be looking out for. You know, how do you know if it's a good one or not? The first thing you need to do is dispel everything you were taught, if you are a child of the 80s or 90s, of thinking that brand names matter. Because in the modern era, all this stuff is coming out of China for the most part. Brand names are often just marketing entities, so it doesn't really matter what brand it is or isn't. It's just not that important. You need to basically make your decision, your determination on what you can observe in terms of quality, in terms of materials, completeness, etc., etc. So that is my first bit of advice. When you start getting into the vintage equipment, as we will a little bit later on, that's when brand names matter. But right now, not so much. Okay, the very first thing is if you see this on the shelf at a thrift store or a charity shop in the UK, you want to see if there's a needle. Oftentimes, even though it looks complete, it may not be. Sometimes, and I've had this happen before, you can snap a really great deal on a piece of equipment because somebody else thought the thing was broken when it really isn't. It just needs a little something, a very small investment perhaps. So you can get a feel for what that is and also decide, do I want to spend any money on this or do I just want something to work? And the needle or the stylus is the first thing out of the gate. Now, we've done extensive videos on how to replace things, how to fix things. So I'm not going to go into that here, but if you want to learn how to do these things, I've got all of that covered 10 times over. Again, check out the new to vinyl playlist. You can simply put your finger very gently down here and feel if there's something that is pointy, if it's a little sharp, if that needle is present, then you're good to go. Oftentimes, even though it looks like everything's complete, you'll put your finger down there, it'll just be flat, and you can tell there's no needle. It's very, very much a recommendation that even if it does have a needle and you buy a used piece of equipment, that you replace that as soon as possible, because who knows how worn out that needle is. The needle has a finite amount of plays, depending on the type, anywhere from 100 to thousands. So you may want to keep an eye on that, and but start off by seeing, does it have a needle? If it's got a needle, then you could probably use it today, unless you want to wait for the new stylus to arrive. Cost on a part like this, the stylus itself, you can get like a 3-pack of these for this particular type, $3 to $5 on eBay or Amazon, no big deal at all. The next thing you want to consider is the belt. A lot of turntables are belt driven, and the belt can come off or break or disintegrate. And again, it doesn't mean the record player is broken. It just means it needs a belt, right? It needs a part. So how do you check? Well, you look under the platter. Wait, I can't lift the platter. What's going on? Well, this type of record player, the all-in-ones and the suitcase players, have this little clip down here, and we need to remove that clip in order to find out if the belt works. Longtime viewers of the channel will laugh because I'm famous for losing these when I pop them off. Take a little flathead screwdriver or a knife and just simply place it in one of these openings here and gently pull back against the spindle by leveraging it. Put your finger there so that it doesn't go flying across the room, which they love to do, and don't lose that. Because if you happen to have a granite countertop that's, I don't know, black and white, that thing can virtually disappear in a heartbeat. So you want to make sure you don't lose this. Okay, with that removed, we can check for a belt. All we have to do is lift up gently, and hey, there's a belt. And sometimes these belts fall off. So if the belt falls off and the person's like, oh, it doesn't work anymore, this record player is broken, they may donate it, and you can score yourself a great little record player, and there's nothing wrong. It just needs the belt put back on. So how do you do that? And again, not wanting to go down the how-to route too much, I'm not going to go into great detail, but you can basically put the belt back on like that. There are these little nubs under here, and if you stretch the belt over the nub, you can then place it back on like this, and the belt will put itself where it's supposed to be. And then don't forget that clip, a lot harder to get on than it is to get off. But if you put it back on like this, you can either use your thumbnails or a flat device or something like a knife or a flathead screwdriver. Be patient. There's a little groove there and just pop it back on. So now we've checked the needle and we've checked the belt. Those are the two most common things, but it's not all. Before you buy this thing for a good deal at your local Goodwill, you need to check a couple more things. Now, while I did say that these are all-in-one solutions, you don't need a stereo system, you don't need anything. You just this does it all. There's a little caveat. If you want to play records that have the large hole, you need a 45 adapter. These come with one, but if it's missing, be aware of that. Something else to consider. They're cheap to buy, but one of the biggest things you're going to make sure that it has is a power supply, because this isn't a rechargeable device. Most of these suitcase players, and certainly the wooden all-in-ones that function very similarly, you can't recharge them like a mobile phone. Even though we're used to so many devices being like rechargeable and take it with you, most of these do not do that. So you have to have a power supply and you have to have the right one in order to make it happen. And it doesn't use USB, it uses this barrel connector here. So these can be had aftermarket. They're not hard to find, but you're going to have to wait, for something to ship probably from China off of eBay or Amazon. That could delay your listening experience. So if you want to listen to records today, you need the belt and it needs to be on, and you need a needle and you need a power supply. So that's, really a huge thing to consider. Looking around the back side of it here, you will see nothing. That's because this one's on the side. And you've got, these all vary a little bit, but they often have line inputs. Outputs, like I said, don't rely on this to make the sound incredible. It will help a little bit hooking this up to a big stereo sound system, but a ceramic cartridge just simply doesn't sound as good as the higher end ones we're going to look at. There's that power supply. They often have headphone jacks. This one has Bluetooth, so you can connect your phone to it. Another thing that people get confused on is they assume that every record player with Bluetooth sends out Bluetooth, like you can connect it to a Bluetooth speaker. And while that is the case now with more and more units, oftentimes the older units only receive Bluetooth, meaning that this will just function as a Bluetooth speaker as well. And you can, like I said, a line input if you want to connect another audio device, but something to consider. If it meets all of your needs to, the features that you want, the price you want, and it has those core essentials, you're ready to go. What would I pay for something like this used? Again, regardless of brand, I would not pay used over $45 for something like this. You can buy a new one for as low as $30, as high as, I wouldn't pay new any more than, say $75 or $65. That would be kind of the very high end. These are entry level. They are, they're going to last you if you take care of them for a period of time. But, you're probably going to, have your interest piqued, and, you're going to spark sort of this enthusiasm and then realize you've picked something that is limited. Or perhaps this is where it begins and ends with you, and you're fine with that. You like the novelty, you like the portability, and no, you can't take it on the beach because, again, it has to be plugged in at all times. And that's fine. But if you find yourself frustrated and you're like, dang, I like this vinyl thing, but I want to take it to the next level, that's where we go to the other path. Okay, so if you don't want to go the novelty route, the next logical solution, or the next logical choice, I should say, is the component route. These are turntables versus record players. They don't have built-in speakers, and they take a little bit of accessorizing in order to work. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So you can find these used at thrift stores, again, for super cheap, sometimes $15, $30, somewhere in that lower range, but you can also spend a heck of a lot of money. If you really want to invest, it's going to be in a component level turntable. This is an example of a fairly common type that you may run into, although there's so many different types. Let's start with the benefits of a system like this. So the biggest thing with these is you're going to get the best sound quality. And there are variables. Some turntables sound better than other turntables, but as a common denominator, these will, generally speaking, sound enormously better than a wooden all-in-one and or a suitcase player. If you are looking at a new turntable, what I was saying earlier stands true as well. that the brand name just doesn't mean that much anymore. The same equipment that it says Sony on it could be made by the exact same company that makes products with a brand name on it you've never heard of. The brand names really don't mean that much anymore. It just is people don't realize it. People like to dog on Crosley all the time, but the same company that makes Audio-Technica, which, gets a lot better press, the same company that makes the Audio-Technica turntables make a lot of the mid and higher end Crosley turntables. So marketing and PR is such a huge part of it. But if you go vintage, that's when you really can count on brand names. Glenburn is sort of a higher end, slightly higher end version of a BSR, which is a fairly common low end changer that you can find out there. This is a slightly higher end version. But if you go vintage, looking for Panasonic, looking for Sony, looking for Technics, those brand names really do mean something if you're going vintage. But this is a good example of a vintage turntable, and a lot of it's going to be similar to what we were doing before. You see this on the shelf. The price point for something like this, again, can be as low as $30, maybe even a little bit lower, and can, depending on what it is, can be hundreds, even used, and that can sometimes be a good deal because, like I said, this is going to give you amazing sound quality. If you do a side-by-side, which, yes, we've done that before, it would blow your mind. But we need to check it out. We're on the shelf, or we're at a Goodwill, and we're looking at this unit on the shelf. Is it worth it? Gently feeling for a needle. Yes, there's a needle there. We need to check for a belt, right? That was something else I talked about. Not all turntables use belts. Some of them use what's called direct drive. These BSR turntables are these BSR types, and a lot of vintage turntables use something called an idler wheel. It's sort of like direct drive, meaning that you don't need a belt, but it's not quite the exact same thing. It uses a rubber wheel underneath to spin things, and they're very durable. They last a long time. They can have their own issues, but we don't need to check for a belt because of the fact this doesn't have one. However, it wouldn't hurt you to take off the platter. There's a similar type of little clip there, and we could pull that off. I'm not going to do that right now, but again, make sure that if it is a belt-driven turntable, and if you're in the store with your smartphone, do a little homework, do a little Google search, find out if it has a belt, and you can make a decision. Now, do I need to check for a belt or not? Another thing you're going to want to decide is, does this thing do what I want it to do? Is this the type of turntable that I want? Case in point is this is a changer. This is made to play a whole stack of records. Do I need that? Am I really going to be changing records? Do I want to stack my records, or do I want to play them one by one? That's a determination to make. This is also automatic. So is that something that I may pay a little bit more for? Or maybe that's not an important feature to me. Maybe I'd like a manual turntable where, I have to control every step of it. This one also has 4 speeds. Now, most of us are going to know what 33 and 45 are, but am I really going to play any 78s, any antique records, or do I even know what a 16 RPM record is? Those are the kinds of things. And if you had 2 of them that you were considering, this one was more, you may say, well, that's a feature I don't need, or I don't really need it to be automatic. I don't really need it to be a changer. Think through it in that aspect, the features that it has. Is this something that you really, really want? Now, one thing I always say about automatics is if you want to play manual and automatic, an automatic turntable like this also works as a full manual turntable as well. So you get the best of both worlds. But if you just want a manual turntable, then you may not want these features. Now, what was I saying earlier? Oh yeah, you need a 45 adapter. Well, there's no 45 adapter here. A lot of vintage turntables didn't come with them. So just realize you're going to need to provide your own. Again, you can find them pretty cheap. Looking on the back, there's no jacks, so you can't really, connect headphones to this. You can't really connect. There's definitely no Bluetooth. It's very limited in what connectivity it has, and that's something to consider as well. Do you want a more modern turntable that may have different features or connectivity or, capabilities that an old one may not have, or vice versa? Again, something to consider. You also need to consider how you're going to connect this. Oftentimes, instead of having a place to plug in cables on the back, the cables just come out of the back of the unit like they do here. Obviously, you've got a power cord. Do check that it's got the right end. If you have an Edison, which would be this type here in the United States, or if you're, in the UK that you don't have an Edison, that you've got a typical, UK style plug. Every once in a while, I've come across, UK style plugs that were permanently attached here in the United States. So just check it. It's worth half a second. And then for the audio cables, they oftentimes just give you the cables connected right out of the back of the unit. And you may be saying, great, what do I need to do here? Just plug it into my stereo system. That takes us to a very, very interesting aspect of vinyl turntables. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a step back. And remember what we were talking about, those ceramic cartridges with the red tip? If you look for red, it's like a 98% chance that it is a ceramic. There are some magnetics that have a red tip, but they're fairly few and far between. Typically speaking, if it does not have a red tip, then it is probably a magnetic cartridge. In some cases, a moving coil, which is a different topic for a different day. This is a pretty common moving magnetic cartridge, and this is one of the big draws of a vintage turntable or even a contemporary modern full-scale turntable, is that it uses a magnetic cartridge instead of ceramic. Couple of benefits. It is lighter on your records. It tracks at a lighter weight. Therefore, your records don't wear out as often. And the biggest thing is they sound a heck of a lot better. They sound noticeably better than a ceramic. So a vintage unit like this with a moving magnet cartridge will sound enormously better than a ceramic any day of the week. It's just a fact. The ceramics sound harsh. They sound sometimes muffled. If the portable or the wooden all-in-one is not impedance matched, it may have a very tinny sound with no bass. You're going to have a world of difference, a positive world of difference with even a vintage unit like this. And you may be saying, well, what am I going to do if it needs a new needle? I'm sure they don't make this cartridge anymore. And that's true. This old Shure cartridge is no longer produced. But there is an ample supply of styli, what they call new old stock or unopened, unused, new needles, parts for these units. If it's a vintage belt-driven turntable, you can find belts for them. If it needs a new cartridge, a new stylus, you can find those easily. Do not let that dissuade you. But again, if you want to be able to play it day one, you need to make sure that these sort of checks and balances are in place. Now, looking at this one, we verified it has a needle. We know because we did a quick Google search that this is a rim drive or an idler wheel. We don't need to check for a belt. And we've got the connections on the back. But because of the fact this is a moving magnet cartridge, it requires an extra piece of equipment that you may not know if you're just looking at this thing on the shelf. The reason why those red tip ceramics are used so much is they are way cheaper than a magnetic cartridge, and they also do not require this extra piece of equipment that we're going to talk about here. And that's because a ceramic outputs a line level voltage. That is a higher level voltage that a stereo or powered speakers can accept as an input. These magnetics, even though they sound superior, output a quieter or lower level signal, and they require something called a preamplifier. So a preamp, here is a basic one, will take the lower level voltage, amplify it up to a line level output, and allow you to connect this now to an input of a stereo or powered speakers. It basically brings the lower level voltage up to line level. So this is something that is not included with this turntable. So it's a consideration that you need to keep in mind. You also have noticed that with the audio cable that is designed to plug into a preamp, and some older stereos actually have a phono input with a built-in preamp circuit in it. So if you have an older stereo that says phono in, it probably has a built-in preamp, so you can connect this directly. But oftentimes you don't have that luxury, especially if you have a newer stereo. See how it gets more complicated? And then you've got this thing. What the heck is this? This is a bent grounding cable. And basically, if you're using an external preamp, you need to ground it at the preamp. So you would connect the inputs, and then you would connect that grounding terminal there as well. So again, something to consider. The next logical question is, how much is a preamp? You can get them anywhere from $15 to $20 on eBay or on Amazon. They're not super expensive for a basic one, but you can also go to town and invest in super high quality ones for minimal changes in quality. But a basic one, you can find something today on Amazon or eBay for, probably $15, $25, no problem at all. So again, with these older ones, make sure that you consider the fact you'll need a preamp or a stereo with a phono input. Now, newer turntables oftentimes come with a built-in preamp, which is nice. There's a little switch on the back that says phono or line. And if you have that, you don't even need an external preamp. You can still choose to use one if you want, but you don't have to use it. So those are the basic considerations. And again, think through it. I have a tendency to get very excited if I'm at the store and I see something that looks exciting, especially if it's new, without thinking through it. So force yourself to slow down, play with the levers. If anything looks broken, if it doesn't have a needle, if it's missing parts, if it's cosmetically, in really bad shape, consider that. Oftentimes these types of changer mechanisms are found in large wooden consoles. Sometimes they're in these cheap plastic cases like this. The first BSR type of mechanism I found, and I was about to walk to the register with it, they had clipped the cables off. They had clipped them off. And I was like, wait a minute, there's no cables on this thing. And that would have been a headache. If you open this up, you will find it's fairly easy to attach this, a little bit less easy to, put on a new power cord. But just take the time to analyze, if it has the parts, if it's in working order, what kind of time and money investment it's going to take to get you where you want to go. I would encourage you not to fall into the trap of saying, okay, so vintage is good and everything new is bad, because that's not the case. There is junky vintage equipment and they can tend to be high maintenance. They tend to require more attention. And then you've got newer equipment, which is often built cheaper, but can have features and things that you want. But there is good, high quality, new equipment being made for somebody that wants sound, but also wants some cool features, especially portability. So what if you want a portable record player, but you don't want the limitations of a ceramic? You don't want something that's, built to this quality level. You want something that's of a higher quality level. The good news is they are making some fantastic portable units that give you the convenience and all-in-one capability of these novelty all-in-ones and suitcase players with the quality of a component level system. This is really, really exciting. This is one of my favorites, probably my absolute favorite new portable on the market. This is a Victrola Revolution Go. The biggest thing is you get the portability with, guess what? A magnetic cartridge. So it tracks lighter. It gives you that super high fidelity sound. This is super exciting. This one also has Bluetooth, so it's high end. It's got some features. It's neat. This is rechargeable too, so you can use this anywhere you want. You could take this on the beach, but don't do that. Sand and vinyl, not a good combination. You can connect your Bluetooth device to this. I think it also streams Bluetooth out. It's got a fantastic sound system built in. These speakers in this little soundbar area are really, really good. It's got all sorts of features and capabilities, yet it is portable. So, and this is something new. This is a fairly new development. Vintage portables and these entry-level portables in the top right-hand corner of your screen are going to be limited. But these new portables that companies such as Crosley, Victrola, and others are making that have that magnetic cartridge can really sound good and be portable. The biggest common denominator of all of this is get yourself a magnetic cartridge if you want sound quality to be a deciding factor. If that's the biggest thing to you, want the best sound, go for the magnetic. But if you still want portable, look for some portables with magnetics. We've reviewed tons on this channel. All right, my friends, thank you so very much for watching. It's been an absolute blast hanging out with you each and every week here on the channel, plus all kinds of other cool content, TikTok, check the links down below, check out our playlist, and again, don't forget to hit subscribe and hit the bell notification, select all, so you don't miss when we go live, because we do giveaways. We give away record players, turntables, records, accessories, you name it. You're not gonna wanna miss that. But my friends, that's gonna do it for today. Happy record hunting. We'll see you next time.